Hello and welcome to episode 23 of No Time to Cry. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon,
And I'm Laura.
and today's episode you'll realise we're not together.
We're not.
This is the first time we've ever recorded not together, which is actually quite sad. Obviously, I did an episode last week with Wes, who was a great guest. And the week before that, well, it came out 2 weeks ago actually, or 3 weeks ago now, was with Paula. But this is mine and Laura's first virtual recording. And we're not making a habit of it. It's just I'm sick. And I really don't want to make Laura ill. Um, because she's only just come back from holiday and the girls are poorly already, aren't they, Laura? So the last thing I wanted to do
Standard.
was standard, yeah, when you go back to nursery. The last thing I wanted to do was kind of go and see Laura and make her poorly, but we didn't want to miss out on recording either because I am feeling a little bit better. So apologies if I sound a bit croaky. I also don't know what the sound's going to be like recording in this room because last time I recorded in my living room, so I'm not sure what this room's going to be like. And Laura's never used those headphones for recording, so we'll try our
I
best, is
haven't.
where we're at.
We will. We'll make the best of the situation, won't we? So
Yeah, exactly. So, how was your holiday, Laura?
it was lovely, thank you. Carnage with two, well, two just slightly over two and under. Yeah, it was. Let's just say I feel like I need a little bit of a rest after coming back. But no, we made lots of memories. It was really nice. And yeah, it's just not for the week though. It's just not for the week going abroad with two little ones. Definitely not, especially when it's long haul. But no, we had a really good time. Thank you, Shan.
Oh, I know. When you said where you were going, I was like, I don't think I could do that with two kids under two. Well, two kids under three, isn't it? Nearly. So yeah, no, you're very brave. But she said before, she was like, I have got a tan, but this lighting's not doing me
My
any
gosh, I like
favors.
Casper the Friendly Ghost. I was just saying, wasn't I? Like for the first time if ever, I've actually come back with a little bit of nice golden colour, and this light just makes me look like I've just risen from the dead. Apparently,
Well, I'm sure you look gorgeous. You always do. So
no.
it's no problem. We wanted to do this episode's a tiny bit of a catch up because obviously, well, first of all, other than WhatsApp voice notes, me and Laura actually haven't caught up in a
Haven't.
couple of weeks.
Mm.
So we thought it'd be worth just having a little bit of a catch up, talking a little bit about Mother's Day because obviously that's been and gone now, and Laura was actually away for it, so that's obviously different for you. Um, and then also, well, technically this episode is going to be a little bit about Laura, to be honest, but we're hoping it's gonna
No
gonna
pressure.
no pressure, Law. Um, is going to help a few others out. So a couple of weeks ago, Laura mentioned before she went away about starting therapy, and she has her first session booked for when's it booked? A week or so's time?
Yeah, 24th of
April.
April. Yeah.
So
I
yeah, a
think what
couple of
month are we in then?
I know. Does feel a bit like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, so we wanted to maybe talk a little bit about like how to prepare for your first ever therapy session. What does that look like? How do you prepare for it? Um, Clearly by now you all know I've been in therapy a very long time. Paula and I did that episode a couple of weeks ago now where we went into therapy, the benefits of it, why we like it, why it's helped us. But there's actually a lot of anxiety. I don't know how you're feeling, Laura, going into your first one, but I can imagine there is a bit of anxiety of what does it look like? What if I don't like them? What if I don't feel comfortable talking? Or what am I going to say? That was definitely me. What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? So we thought it would be useful just to have a bit of a session where one for Laura to prepare a little bit ahead of time, but also for anybody else that's maybe thinking about it and worrying that that first session, how do I even get to a point where I'm prepared to talk? That it will be useful for those.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Shan. I do feel a little bit apprehensive about it. I suppose that's quite normal because I've never spoken to anyone professional who's sort of an expert in their field before. And equally, I'll be honest, I've not done a ton of research into the style of therapy that I think might
Mm.
be best suited to to me because I don't necessarily know what that's going to look like. So, yeah, I've got a few questions sort of whirling around my head as to what it'll be like. But I just thought, you know what, let's just bite the bullet, give it a go, see what the first session's like. Hopefully, I get something out of it and I see that there's potential for me to get something from that particular therapist. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Shannon, the respect that again, you'll be able to talk to this better than I will, but I do imagine because you're having to be so vulnerable and sort of raw about your feelings that you do have to have some sort of connection on a personal level with your therapist to be able
Yeah.
to sort of open up and go to the depths that you need to get what you need out of therapy. So yeah, hopefully I will get that, but it's just starting the journey, isn't it? Ultimately, that's what you've got to sort of push yourself to do. So
Yeah, and it's very easy to put it off and say, "Oh no, don't want to do it," or what it looks like. But I think the more open-minded you are, the better it will be for you, and the more you'll get out of it. That's always been my approach. The more you're willing to open up and just kind of take it for what it is, the better you'll find the experience. Before we get into that, Lord, do you want to talk a little bit
mhm.
about your Mother's Day, being on holiday, and how you found that? Because that's like really different to how you've spent the prior 2 years.
Yeah, so I think I alluded to it in the last episode that I was on. Gosh, which one was that now? Um, and I really struggled the run up to Mother's Day this year. I don't know if it's because I feel further and further away from mum. And I had a really sad conversation actually with my husband about it just before we went away. In that this maybe sounds a little bit daft, but I don't know if you get this as well, Shannon, or if other people do, but I was having some really bad days where I was thinking, did my mum ever exist? Like, what, like, was she ever really here? Was that sort of like real life? Which I know sounds a bit mad, but when so much time has passed, and it's only it's 3 years this year, but for me it feels like an eternity when you speak to somebody every day. Like that feels like like a decade almost. Um, and I'm getting further and further away from the last time I spoke to her, the last time I gave her a hug, the last time I heard her voice and had a brew with her and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I think it's maybe my brain trying to sort of like protect me a little bit because I think I'm trying to search for that and I just want to have that, that almost like physical connection with her again and to speak to her and because I can't, um,
Yeah.
it sent me into a bit of a spiral, and I just kept saying, "Did she ever exist? Like, was she even here? Was that real?" And Todd was like, "Of course she was. Like, it's totally normal that you're feeling this way, I'm sure, but it is quite a like bizarre feeling to suddenly have somebody so part of your life, such a
Mm.
huge impact on your life, for them to just not be here. It's really difficult to wrap your head around, isn't it? So,
Yeah, and what
yeah,
was it like? Because I imagine sometimes, like, when you're in your own home, you're in your own environment, I was just trying to think where it could go one way or another being away. Like, is it good to have a distraction of something different from day to day life, or is it easier to distract yourself with keeping busy in the house, tidying, doing stuff like that? Whereas on holiday, I always feel like I've got more space to think, which is normally a good thing, but not always. So I just wonder how you felt.
yeah. I think the first few days I found really difficult. Because I don't know why I associate this to my mum, but I do. I always think about my mum and the beach and sunbathing because she was a proper sun worshipper, wasn't
Yeah,
she?
she loved it.
She called it the big burn, which is awful. Obviously, anyone that needs to be looking after the skin, remember your SPF. But she'd always spend like a good hour at the end of the day of every holiday, just like tanning as much as she could, like a leather handbag. Um, so yeah, whenever I go on holiday, I do think of mum, especially at those times of day. Um, I do think it was a positive thing for me to be away, because obviously when you are at home, you're surrounded by all of the advertisements and just it's plastered everywhere, as we've said before, isn't it? In terms of like at the supermarket, in restaurants, all over your emails. And I was quite lucky actually because I decided whilst I was away to have like a bit of a detox from my phone. So all of my friends, family knew that while I was away, I was going to be pretty much not MIA, but I was going to try and stay away from any form of communication or social media as much as I could, which I did do, which I'm quite proud of myself for because I don't think it's as easy as you think, is
I
it?
know, I missed you.
Oh, I missed you too. But it helped. I think it gave me a clearer head, and I wasn't having to worry about seeing things that I didn't necessarily want to come up on my phone either. So I think it gave me a clearer head. And I wasn't really thinking about Mother's Day because it's not necessarily something that's massively, well, it wasn't massively advertised while I was there anyway. Um, so I think it's what I needed. I don't know if I'll feel the same next year. Maybe I'll be in a better headspace and I can enjoy it and be at home and celebrate mum and myself as a mum to my two girls. But yeah, and then of course as soon as I got home, I went straight to the shops to get some bits for mum and went to see her. So that was nice. But again, it's really bittersweet, isn't it? That on Mother's Day you just wish you could go round or just give her a call and say I'm popping over to take you out for dinner and stuff, and obviously you can't do that. But um, yeah, I took the girls, we put some fresh flowers out for her, and Sienna bought some sweet pea seeds. Well, obviously I bought
Oh.
them, but because my mum loves sweet peas, so we've well, I've never grown flowers in my life, and you know what I'm like, Shan. Anyone who knows me, I'm just not necessarily. I love plants, but I'm not the best plant tender.
Same as me.
So I'm
Same as
praying
me.
and hoping that they will last well. But the idea is I'm gonna like obviously take some snippets to mum and then just keep them there for future, I guess, for me to grow them in the garden. So that's something cute that we did together. And Sienna said these are for Grandma J, so she kind of
Oh,
understands a little bit. So
bless her. I think it is weird because obviously as Sienna gets older, she might have more questions and stuff as well. So it
yeah,
will be
100%.
a bit of a journey for you, I suppose, as that goes on when you want to go and do those things, like preparing yourself that she is obviously going to be inquisitive, as will Eleni when she gets to an age where she's able to ask questions. So, no, I just wanted to check in on you really more than anything because I think it is a really, really tough time of year for so many people. And it would have sort of I kind of feel a little bit amiss if we had spoke about it on the lead up and not been like, oh, okay, actually, how was that for you? Because I know that you weren't feeling great going into it, and it's nice to hear that although it still wasn't the best day, I'm sure that it sort of felt a little bit like you um, were a bit more at ease, and I relate to that because when I went to Paris a couple of days before Christmas, not Christmas just gone, the Christmas before with Paula. And I was really struggling at Christmas time. If you remember that year, it was a really, really tough year for me. And I felt so much better just for going away a couple of days. Didn't take it away, but it was just a nice distraction to have.
Yeah,
That was a very different type of holiday. Obviously, it was a city break, whereas yours has been more of a beach holiday. But I think spending time doing stuff that gives you like serotonin boosts and makes you feel a bit better. Like I know people say like, "Oh,
100%.
money can't buy you happiness," but I mean, if I'm going to be sad, I'd rather be sad on the beach.
Absolutely, absolutely. How many people do you know that sit on a beach having a cocktail in the sunshine that are unhappy? Like it's just, yeah, it's unheard of, isn't it? So yeah, I do think if you can and you're struggling, it is good to get away. Obviously, you don't have to go anywhere tropical. You can even just
No,
go, just for a walk somewhere new that you haven't been to before. Just the countryside in general can be so beautiful, can't it? So, um, but yeah, like to be honest, I didn't celebrate it at all. Like to me, it kind of came and went.
yeah,
And that was like a conscious decision that I made because I wasn't in the country anyway to go and see mum. I still very much thought of her, of course, but it was, I think I sort of needed to just get through the day, really, to be honest, as a normal
yeah.
day. So
And sometimes that's the best way. I always say to you, I never really celebrate those occasions for me, they are better to be passed by, and then when I'm ready, I can do things that I want and need to do. So it's
Yeah,
everybody's different. Everybody can, and you never know. As years go by, we're obviously still very early days in our grief. It's only been what will be nearly 3 years for you in September. Wow,
I know. Yeah, it's
crazy.
crazy. It's crazy. Like time goes by so fast, doesn't it? And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? With time's so fleeting, but then you look at it and you think, gosh, that has flown. But at the same time, you're reminded of everything that they've missed out on. And I think that's
Mm.
probably the toughest thing that I've been through most recently is that, I've got a 3-year-old daughter this year, which is insane.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's mad, isn't it? I've had another baby since. And, I just, obviously a lot happens in life generally, doesn't it? But it's just so unfortunate that the time that we kind of lost mum was the time when so much was going on um, in mine and my siblings' lives, and stuff that she should have been at the forefront of and enjoying and being a huge part of that she just hasn't been. So it's all of that really. It's thinking about the key things that have happened and events and milestones that you wish they'd have been a part of and they're not. So you just have to find ways to, I guess, make it feel like they are still here, which is why we bought the sweet peas, because I just thought, it's something nice that Sienna and I could do together, and hopefully one day if I can continue that, she'll always relate that to my mum. Was my
Yeah,
idea, so just trying to do it that way, I suppose.
no, definitely that makes sense. Well, thanks for sharing, Law, because I think it's nice for people to kind of get a bit of insight and a bit more. And we had some comments and stuff on the video of people just hoping that Mother's Day was okay for you. So I wanted to make sure that we had kind of checked in a little bit and people had an opportunity and
It's really
to talk to you
kind
about
that
it.
people even thought about it, and you've asked as well, of course, Shan. So thank you. And I just wanted to extend the same to anybody else as well that's just been through it, because it is really hard, and I hope you made the best of the day that you could. But equally, like my mum always used to say, don't put too much pressure on
Yeah,
things like Mother's Day or any day, even like Christmas Day, she used to say, because it is just a day. And
yeah.
I think, in this society now, things are so commercialized, aren't they? Like even as like a kid now, when I think back, everything seems to have some sort of extra commerciality around it, whether it's like even like Christmas Eve, for example, you get Christmas Eve boxes and you've got your stockings and
Or
everything the
even
next
the
day,
kids
and
at Easter get presents now.
Easter hampers. Yeah,
I got some Easter eggs and that was it.
exactly. And you were dead lucky and fortunate if you got an Easter egg, weren't you? And I just think, yes, it's gorgeous and everything, but it just sort of makes you think, woman heck,
There's
like
a lot of pressure on parents as well,
pressure.
I think. And it
100%, yeah.
makes you feel more pressure to do more and be more. I mean, we're not a big Valentine's house. We don't celebrate Valentine's Day really because it's not something that we massively relate to. I don't know. I think it's nice, but I think if you're sort of you've been with a partner a long time, like you've got anniversaries, you've got birthdays that you do, and you do like date nights and celebrate and all those sort of
Yeah, you
things. I
do them
don't.
anyway, don't you? You don't need one day to you should be celebrating your loved one every day in small ways, shouldn't you? So
That's it. So, but even that is like huge, and yeah, I completely get that because it is really difficult. And do you know what I noticed? I think I'm a lot more aware now anyway on days like that. So even though it wasn't my mum that passed away, I'm always like super wary of like what people post and obviously think about it often from Laura's perspective and what she would be thinking and feeling and stuff like that. But I noticed how many people post about lost loved ones.
yeah,
I
it's
saw so
heartbreak,
much of it.
and it's not even just mothers that have that that you've lost through losing them in general through grief. It can be like we've said before, relationships that have broken down, or
Mm,
perhaps you've never had a good relationship with your mum to begin with, or perhaps your mum's never been around. It's all of that, isn't it? Sort of intertwined. And if you're, looking to try and conceive and try and be a mother yourself, there's just
mm,
so much to think about on that day. And And I think, depending on what you're going through in your life at that time, it can be a very difficult day. Um,
Yeah.
it's nice though that I think there's more awareness of that. I think previously there wasn't. But I think there are a lot of people now that are a bit more conscious of making sure that they're being empathetic to those that they love and care for that perhaps aren't in the same situation as them. So I do
No,
think that's really
definitely.
nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And that's so important, isn't it? Just to have that sort of like self-awareness that your situation isn't necessarily representative of everybody. So it's just about mindfulness and being aware and not no one's saying that you can't like shower your mums in gifts
Oh
and
no, go for
post
it. Do
about
it.
it and do it. We want do you know what is so interesting actually I've just said that. I was with a couple of friends this week and we were talking, we'd been out, we'd been to a concert and stuff and, we're sort of chatting away and things like that. And there was a couple of people that I'd not met before, and we were just talking about all different things. And one of my close friends was talking about when I hear conversation. I think we've touched on this before, actually,
Mm.
but it's somebody different that asked me about it. When I talk about my dad, or this, that, and the other, or when I talk about my childhood, and it was very different to yours. Like, do you sort of what's the word? Not get annoyed, but almost like, "All right, it's all right for you." And I said, "I couldn't be any further. Like, I'm sad for me because that happened to
Yeah,
me. I
yeah.
don't want you to go through that. I'm happy that
You
that's
wouldn't
like."
wish it on anyone.
No, no,
You know?
it's like, I'm sad that I didn't get to have it. I don't resent you having it. It's like,
Yeah,
it's not,
yeah.
I'm glad that that's the experience you had. I'm glad that you've still got your dad here. Like, I'm not like, oh, well, ooh. Like, do you know what I mean? But it's interesting,
Some
is
people
it's like,
are though, some people are. So I
some
think
people
it's
are.
sweet that people ask at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's nice to ask. It's definitely nice to ask. But from my side, and I think if you are someone that's grieving, try and think about it like that because you shouldn't really feel resentment towards people, not suffering as much as you, I
Yeah, yeah.
suppose.
How dare you not be in the
Yeah.
depths of hell. No,
Um,
it's a massive one, isn't it? I think that just speaks volumes about the type of person they are. Like I always think, it's really kind for somebody to be thinking about your feelings whilst they've said something that perhaps they think might be a trigger point for you.
yeah.
Um, but like you say, Shan, ultimately, if anything, you just want to say, just make the most of every moment, the precious time that you've got together, because it's like that. It's really sad, this saying, but I didn't think about it until maybe like a few years ago now. And as soon as you start to get older and have like your own kids and stuff, you think about it even more. But there's a last time for everything. So there's the last time that you went to school, the last time that you had your last Christmas at home, the last time you gave, your mum a hug. And that sits with me so much more now than it ever used to. And it's really like quite deep to think about. But there is always a last time, and you never know when that last time's gonna be.
Yeah. So hold
Um
on to things a bit
oh yeah,
tighter.
100%. Just make the absolute most of it and never feel like your relationship with your loved ones, like that you can't enjoy every moment, even if somebody else is going through like a really difficult time of loss, because they'd want that for you.
Yeah, I
They'd want
think
you
to
to enjoy it.
100%. To caveat that, I think the other side of it is not to. I feel like we've touched on this briefly before, but it was interesting because one of the other girls was sort of talking about it from a different angle where she doesn't speak to her dad,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she's had a lot of people who have lost someone like their dad go, you only get one dad, like just reach out to him, do this, do that, and I think that that's so. It's said with such good intent, obviously, because they're grieving the loss of their loved one, but you c- you just can't, you can't sort of your loss and grief can't be reflected onto somebody else by saying that you have to keep that relationship, because like we've said before, Law, you don't walk away from any family member lightly.
Not unless you've got a very, very good reason for it. And the thing what's difficult in that sort of scenario is that 9 times out of 10, that person that's had to walk away from a parent or a sibling or a relationship or a partner, whatever it looks like, 9 times out of 10, they've tried countless times to try and make it work. And if it's irreparable and they just feel like they have to move on, then that's one of the hardest things to do in the world, right? It takes so
Yeah.
much courage and it's heartbreaking itself. So I get that. And like you say, most of the time that it's good intent when people say, "Oh, just reach out." But yeah, I think it's just being conscious of the fact that I'm sure they've tried many times before.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us nicely, I suppose, into talking
Mm.
about like preparing for therapy and
Yeah, help.
my yeah.
Give you some tips.
But I think it's really important to have a think about like what you want to get out of it. Like what, because sometimes it's easy to be overwhelmed by all the reasons you think you feel the way that you do about certain stuff. And
Yeah.
in my experience, they always uncover stuff that you didn't anticipate.
That's what makes me nervous, I think, because in my head, I'm sort of trying to psychoanalyze myself and think, "Oh, it's gonna be this, oh, it's gonna be that," and you already know that, and you're gonna be able to just sort that out because you've known for all this time that that's the issue.
Sometimes that is the case. There's
Could
certain bits
be,
that I struggle with that I
could be.
know that I struggle with, and I can root down to a specific thing. But I also think that um, our brains are a lot more complex and hold on
Mm,
to things that you don't even realize, or as you know, we've not been trained in to think
100%.
about in certain ways. Our brains, we're not trained therapists, we're not trained counselors. And unless you've done that, I don't think that some of the questions and obviously by all accounts it depends what kind of therapy this is that you're doing. Is it just sort of like cognitive behavioral, like talking through things?
I think so initially, which again, obviously, maybe I'm being naive. I don't necessarily know what that will look like. But what I do know is if someone's going to sit there and keep asking me, "So how do you feel? So how do you feel?" That will not work for me because
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I'm open to it. I'm going to be open minded. I'll give it a try, but I just think that particular type of sort of methodology, I don't think will necessarily be the right approach for me. But
I do think that's very
yeah,
stereotypical therapy though. That's like sit on a
yeah.
couch. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, and I'll be like, "Oh, please don't. How long have you got?"
I don't know how I feel, that's why I'm
Do you know
here.
what? That's the thing though, I don't sometimes, and I think what sort of got me to the point of realizing that I needed to go to therapy was, when I did lose mum, I sort of dipped my toe in the water and thought like now's the time, but I think it was too raw for me at that point. And a lot of people say obviously not to touch therapy around that time unless you've obviously been in it before, like yourself, Shan. Where you sort of not pre-programmed, but you know what I mean. You sort of
No.
you know where you're going to sort of get to with it initially, and you know what it all sort of looks like. Whereas now I sort of feel like I don't necessarily think I have, like a lot of people probably haven't as well in this scenario. I don't think I've come to terms with a lot of stuff that's happened because so much happened in such a condensed period of time.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm trying to figure out why am I feeling the way that I am, I sometimes I'll say it to Todd. I'll say, "Oh, I'm really missing mum today. Like that's definitely the reason why I'm in such a bad place." And he's like, "I don't think it." Obviously,
I
that's a
don't think
part of it, but he's
it
like, "I
is.
don't think it is. I think it's actually this." Um, so yeah, I kind of just want to get to the root cause of is it just that there's just such a compounded amount of challenges that I face in such a sort of like a compressed, consolidated amount of time that because so much was happening at once, I just didn't really deal with any of them.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? Whereas
yeah.
normally I would have maybe dealt with at least one of them better, seen it through, whereas I buried my head in the sand with a lot of it. And I know that I did. So it's compartmentalized in my brain. At some point it's going to come up, isn't it? And I just want to make sure I kind of deal with it before it comes out in a way that I don't want it to.
Yeah, and I think Chod's probably hit the nail on the head, if I'm honest. But I think it's
He's my new
really
therapist. No, I'm joking.
Can
Imagine. Oh god.
you imagine? Yeah, I'm your husband and your therapist. I think there might be a slight conflict of interest. Can you imagine? Right, I want to talk about my husband today. He's really
Oh
annoyed
god,
me.
no.
Nope, he's perfect.
I have to repeat myself a million times to it, so he'd be the worst therapist ever. Like, have you talked about that? This, like, yeah, I've
So
talked
you
about
said
it
that
every week.
before. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
I've said it 10 times.
yeah. So I do. I think in my head I'm trying to prepare. He did say to me that it's actually a gentleman who is the therapist, which, like I said to Shan before, I'm not in any way sort of suggesting that I'd not be open to speaking to a man over a woman. But I think stereotypically in my head, most of the therapists that I know of or that my friends go to are women. Um, so I'm just intrigued as to whether that would be
And I
different
do
at
think
all.
it's fair to say that you might feel slightly apprehensive about that because
Mm,
naturally, some of the traumatic events that happened in your life was during your pregnancy, your birth, straight after that. And that's not to say that he won't, you don't know what he specializes in. You don't know his experiences. You don't know who he's, um, counseled before who may have had experiences similar. Because I don't think that therapists necessarily need to have gone through things themselves. They just need to know sort of what that might look like and how to support. So I don't think that you should necessarily be feeling apprehensive, but I think it's fair for you to feel
Probably quite
that
natural,
way.
isn't it? And
Definitely.
I am very open minded. You know what I'm like. I will very much go in with open arms and just say like I'm willing to give anything a go. Um, so he did say, just make sure before the session you've got at least sort of an hour afterwards to decompress.
Yep.
Initially, obviously, it'd be a little bit more exploratory, I guess, and trying to figure out where to start. But
Yeah. But I think you should have a think about that in terms of, like I said, rather than listen, you've been alive for 30 odd years, 23
careful.
years. You've been alive for 30 odd years. Um, an hour you can't talk about everything that's
I'm an
happened in
old
your
goose, old
life.
goose now. Yeah,
It's impossible, and that's why I think it's important to carry on with therapy. Like for now, for me, I've got to a point where I've gone through a lot of stuff that's happened to me in the past, and now it's like, how do I move forward? What's going on now? How do
yeah.
I, and that's like that's the good part of therapy when you get to that point and you can talk about how you move forward, how you better yourself in the present tense, and you still sometimes relate back to things, but that initial part. So my advice to anybody that was thinking about starting therapy or has their first session booked would be is like, what do you want to get out of it? Like, why are you there? Why did you seek therapy in the first place? Like, what's the feelings that you're having, or what's the because I think it's better to start there. Because
Mm.
if
Yeah,
he
yeah.
goes to you, why have you come to therapy? And you're like, well, my mum died, and then I had a baby, and then and he's like, okay, there are a lot of
There's lots to unpack there.
yeah, a lot of it to unpack, but there are a lot of instances, a lot of things, not how you're feeling on the back of it. So it's like, you know, what brought you to therapy? What are you struggling with? What emotionally aren't you feeling content with, or,
Mm.
overwhelmed with? I know for yourself, Lord, there's been like maybe it's the fact that you don't understand how you're feeling all the time, and that would be what I would lead with. It would be I've had a lot go on in a short period of time, but actually across my life, if I'm honest, it's been a very turbulent time, as I'm sure it is for most people in their lives. Nobody's life is plain sailing. But what I'm finding different at the moment to any other point in my life is these certain emotions that I'm struggling with, or overall not being able to pinpoint why
Mm.
I'm feeling something, or is it I'm putting it down to the loss of my mum, which I lost 2 years ago, and you can explain that. But actually, I can't, I'm feeling sad and I can't quite work out, is it just
Why?
about
Where's it
my
coming
mum, or
from?
where's that sadness coming from? You
Yeah,
know,
100%. I think
and I
that's interesting and a good point, Shan, because that's exactly what I was thinking the other day. Was yeah, why am I doing it?
Yeah, because I think
Um,
it's so. I spoke about it with. I would be intrigued to see what he says. I remember I spoke about it on the episode with Paula that I used to say all the time. I feel anxious. I'm
mm,
anxious. I'm anxious, and it wasn't anxiety. It was me suppressing all of the other emotions that I didn't want to really sit with, understand. So it gave me a ball of anxiety constantly because I was just suppressing everything
yeah,
else.
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's sort of like almost misclassifying what you're feeling for something else, and you sometimes just need somebody to redirect that and to say, "No, these are normal feelings, but actually it's this that you're experiencing." And I'm a bit conscious of that. I think some of the things that I've been feeling recently, and I know I'm not, and this is a newer thing that I felt probably over the last, I don't know, maybe 3, 4 months, is like I'll have days where I feel very alone,
Mm,
which is bizarre because I'm never ever on my own.
mm,
um, Obviously, I've always got like most of the time I'll have at least one of the girls with me, if not both of them. Um, but yeah, I can feel quite lonely, which doesn't really make sense because I've got a lot of I'm so lucky to have the network that I have. But then in my head, I'm thinking that's got to be coming from somewhere though. Like
yeah.
there's something that's making you feel that way, regardless of who's surrounding you. And like I say, I'm super fortunate to have such an amazing husband, best friends, family that are there for me. But yeah, there's days where I feel very isolated, and that as a mum is quite difficult because you've got to really be able to show up and be present for your kids, which is obviously what I always do. But then equally, then you sort of deprioritize the facts that you're feeling the way that you are, and
Mm.
you sort of try and look past it, which isn't good for anybody. So
And I
yeah,
think that is so important for you to unpack because naturally, I think you and I are quite emotionally aware people. So we could sit here and have a conversation about it without doubt. And I might have some ideas of where I think that might be coming from, and we could talk it through and we could have a conversation. But I am not a therapist,
yeah,
so there's
yeah.
nothing to say that what I say might actually be the case. Obviously, because I've been through a lot of therapy and shared similar feelings myself at certain points, but it'd be really unfair for me to kind of sit here and go, "Law, it's definitely this. This is the reason why you feel
Yeah,
lonely." It's
exactly.
bang,
Yeah.
bang, 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 because I don't know. I could have an educated guess, but I genuinely don't know. And even your therapist won't necessarily know, but they will be able to ask you the questions to try and unpack it a little bit more and work out what that is. And there's all, like we said, there's all different types of therapy. We're going to have the therapist on in a couple of weeks to talk about that, some different styles, talk about therapy in a bit more detail. Um, but I just think it's important for you to like that. I'm feeling lonely at the moment. I don't really know why because I'm surrounded by people. I still feel a great amount of sadness and I don't always know what it's about. I know at times you've said to me you're feeling a bit more anxious about things.
Mm,
Okay, so like let's talk about that and think I would concentrate more on the feelings that you're having and then let the whys unravel into that and unpack it. Don't you lead with the all of these things happened to me, which is not necessarily a bad thing to lead with. Like it's actually probably what I did, to be honest. Um
I suppose that's just the natural way of doing it, isn't it? In your head, if you've not been through therapy before, then you're sort of thinking, well, where do you start? And that's a good point as well, Shannon. What I've tried to do in terms of like trying to figure out, well, how do I start and get the most out of the time, I suppose, is I do want to sort of like write some of my feelings and questions down because
100%
I want
do
to be
that.
more concise with stuff. I don't want to sort of be like, you could just be like word vomit, can't you?
Yeah. And you
Um,
do only have an hour, and you'll be so surprised how quickly that hour
oh
goes.
God, yeah, yeah,
It goes so
100%.
quick because sometimes I think, for myself, what I found it was like I'd finally popped the cork, and then I couldn't. I was like,
Yeah,
"Ooh."
Yeah, and she was like, "Right, Shannon, now, no, stop, next
I
session,
mean, my
please."
poor therapist. I mean, sometimes even she runs over and we talk for another 20 odd minutes and
Oh,
and it's not me just yapping, she's still asking me questions, because that's like how she is. But again, all therapists are different, obviously. Um, but I do think that it's good for you. I think if he's great, good. That's a great start. Maybe you'll be lucky, like I was, and find someone straight away. I think it's also important to note a lot of the times when we've spoke about therapy, um, being Paula and I, we've gone privately, whereas this is via the NHS. So
yeah,
again, you don't have that opportunity to do as much research or pick them out. Would they be well suited to me? Would they not? And that's kind of the benefits of doing NHS is obviously you'd have to pay for it, what you do with your national insurance and all those
yeah.
other things, but like in general, it's free healthcare and
Important to make use of it though, isn't it? And that's
of
why I just
course.
thought, I'm just gonna give it a try, and for anyone who
Also, like you are on maternity leave,
I
like
know, I know, I know.
it's one of those. Like the reason that I didn't go via the NHS is because I am fortunate enough to be in work, and I had a recommendation to go um, to Sue, and I'm can afford it. Right? It's like I'm very privileged to be able to afford it. And it's not to say that you couldn't necessarily afford it, but whilst you're in the final months of your maternity leave, after having two kids nearly back to back, like I think it's important to say, you know therapy is not cheap either. And I think if you are in a position where you can get access to it via the NHS,
Yeah,
it's
you should make
important to
use of it.
use those resources. And I think for myself, I was a bit more desperate at the time to speak to somebody. Um, it was more of like an intense situation rather than like a build up over
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So
There
you just
was
needed to
I
speak,
need,
didn't
yeah,
you?
I need, and the same for Paula, right? We both went into I think you've done it in a way of you're more aware of therapy because a lot of your friends are in therapy. So it's kind of been for you when you've been ready to go on that journey, whereas I feel like I sort of parachuted into it because I was panicking and I'm like, oh, someone help me, catch me
Yeah,
before I
yeah.
fall. So I had to, going to I think we're all aware that GP wait lists
Well, I'm insane.
they're very long at the moment. So if you can wait, absolutely go down that route. That's why we pay national insurance. That's why we
You
pay
get
tax,
fast
all those
tracks as
things.
well. Certain people get fast tracks.
And it
They
does
are
also depend on your area.
yeah, that's true.
So if your local area doesn't, happens to have a lower rate of people struggling with mental health or are going to their GP to talk about mental health or support, then you're likely to be seen quicker. Whereas if you're in a very busy area and there is, you know, less staff versus the amount of people, maybe there's a
It'll
high
take longer.
population in a certain area versus the amount of hospitals, doctors, whatever therapists are available, then unfortunately, I know when some of my family have gone down that route that live in London, and you're
Yeah,
looking
no
like
chance.
it's like God, for kids it's really long. It's like years. Um,
It's really sad, but I suppose it's so, the NHS is so stretched and they're
yeah,
just trying to do their very best, but you do actually get fast tracked if you're postpartum.
which is really important, and I think so. You
Yeah.
should, with like babies and
Yeah, you
stuff
look
like
after
that.
like small children. It's really important that you're in the best possible headspace that you can be. But I do think what was interesting when I first opened up about it at the GP, and this is no shade on the doctors or anything, but she immediately said, "I'll put you on medication,"
Yeah, that happened to me
and
as
I was
well when
like,
I first moved up
"I'm
north.
breastfeeding," and she was like, "Oh yeah, you definitely can't go on anything then." But it was just there wasn't even that discovery as to like, firstly, could I take medication?
Yeah.
Secondly, was it actually the right course of action? Because actually, you know, I'm not again, I'm open minded, but I don't necessarily think it's something that I'd want to jump straight into. I'd want to try and look maybe more holistically first, or look at therapy as an option. But I did think that was a little bit sad that that was like the automatic.
And that happened to me. So when I I don't know if I think I did mention on a previous podcast, but when I was about 19, 20, I really, really suffered with bad anxiety. And that, again, it was at that time manifesting itself as anxiety, but later I got diagnosed with PTSD. Um, and I had a really, really bad experience at the GP, unfortunately. My GP is one of those where there's like a different doctor every week. Like they've constantly got different doctors in and out of there. There's not like a stable. Whereas when I lived in London, like my GP from when I was a baby was still my GP when I was like
Yeah,
18,
yeah.
19 before I moved up north. I think he still runs that doctor's surgery as well. Um, but yeah, I went to my GP and I told them I was having really bad panic attacks at work. I was just really just struggling in general. I'd had an incident happen back in London before I moved up. And yeah, I just was really struggling with my mental health. I was just having really, really bad panic attacks. I didn't want to leave the house. And she told me to grow a thicker skin
Oh my gosh.
and basically said tough, like grow a thicker skin, like.
Yep, will do.
And I was like, uh, I don't really know how.
Like you're some sort of snake, you're just gonna go, like,
And
shed
I've
your
got a
skin and
thick skin as well,
yeah, you
Lloyd,
have.
like.
Jesus. Couldn't be any thicker really compared to most people. That's no, it's just not right, is
No,
it?
and she didn't even offer me medication. She literally was like,
Get over it.
basically, I think
That's
it's
what
because
she
I
was like.
started with the fact that I was having bad panic attacks at work, and she was basically like, "Well, sounds like you just don't like your job." And I was like, No, I've worked for years before this. I've been fine. It's been like there's like a bit of them. I don't know what it is that's making me feel anxious, but I'm feeling anxious."
That's
um,
awful.
And anyway, I walked out and it was Jamie actually that said to me, like, call the GP back and complain because like you've come away with no support, no help, nothing, like at all. So I did, and I don't know if I'm like sent the message I basically said I want to see a different GP. Like I'm really in a bad way. I think I left it a couple of weeks. And I couldn't leave the house. I was literally in a really bad way. Um,
Um,
and I called back and I saw a different GP, like a different guy, and he was really good. And he taught me, actually went through some breathing techniques with me at the GP surgery, um, and referred me to have like an assessment, which is when I got diagnosed with PTSD. And then they referred me for CBT, which I didn't end up doing. They sent me a load of like paperwork and stuff like that, but I ended up starting a new job and throwing myself into that, which probably wasn't the best thing. But the panic attacks actually did stop. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. But he put me on medication as well. So I was on. Is it sertraline? Is that normally what they give you?
I'm not sure.
I took some tablets. For me, if I'm honest, now knowing a bit more than I did back when I was like 19, 20, I didn't take them for long enough to see whether they would have had a positive impact on me or not. Um,
Yeah, it's nothing against medication. Obviously, for some people, like, it's the best course of action, isn't it? I think that's the other
yeah.
thing. It's just trying to figure out sort of what's best for the individual because yeah, I don't know if it's not necessarily always the right thing to recommend though, isn't it?
No, because
Is
it
it?
doesn't resolve the issues. Like I think there's a big difference between depression, where it is mostly led, well, not always, but that can be led by a chemical imbalance.
Hmm.
Which at that point I think medication is a good route to go down,
Is
right?
yeah,
It's
true.
replacing those chemicals, they're like man-made replacements for the ones that you're sort of lacking. And that can really help people and can make them feel a lot better. But if you, in my case, had PTSD, or which I would probably assume you've got some variation of somewhere law, like not to diagnose you, but like you've been through some very traumatic circumstances. I think you have to unpack that. If I'm honest, I
Yeah,
don't.
you can't just take. medicine straight
Feels like
away
a
without
sticky
knowing what it
plaster, right? If
is,
you
isn't
don't
it?
talk
Yeah.
about it, but you just kind of, I think that it could actually probably work very well together. You know, if you've got um need medication, but then I think you still need to speak to somebody. You know, I think you've got to discuss that a bit more. But I took them for, I don't know, 3 weeks, but they were making me feel worse, which is actually a very common side effect. And then normally after a month you
You
overcome
feel
it. But
better, yeah.
I couldn't get to that point. Like I was really one, they were making me feel very nauseous, and I hate feeling sick. Like I really, really hate feeling sick. Um, won't take any medication that makes me feel poorly. Like I'd rather
I don't
suffer.
blame you.
I hate feeling sick, like any nauseous like type thing. Um, and yeah, I ended up, I think he changed them after like 2 weeks because I was like, this is not good. Like I literally can't even lift my head off the pillow. I feel really poorly all the time. Um, and then I took another set for like 3 weeks, and then I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna try and do a little bit of self digging here. What I actually did was throw myself into a new job and bury it until years later, which is definitely would not recommend. But at that time, it worked for to get me out of that cycle. Like it actually did get me out of that
Change of
cycle.
environment and setting as well, like, sometimes that can be massive. You can be in certain
Yeah.
places or around certain
Well, that
people and
job was definitely triggering me, the job that
yeah,
I
yeah,
was doing at the time. And it was something about the building or the place that was triggering me when I got there, which had nothing to do with all the reasons that I have PTSD. But for whatever reason, like my brain was identifying it to something that was triggering me, which is just can
yeah,
happen,
yeah.
right?
Can
Like it
happen,
doesn't
yeah.
have to be, it's like we said before when we've got upset looking at a crisp packet. Like obviously that shouldn't trigger you, but your brain relates it to
Relates
something
it
that
to it.
it does, which is just odd, but like the truth. Um, so yeah, I think if I was you, I would write things down, be prepared. Um,
To be uncomfortable, that's the
yeah,
big thing,
to
isn't
be
it?
uncomfortable, to get things off your chest. Like the more open-minded you are, the better. Don't close your mind off to anything. Ponder any questions. Don't feel like you've got to have the answers to everything. You know, if they ask you a question, don't let your first reaction go. Like sit with it for a second, you know, and be like, actually, how do I feel about that? You know, what is my opinions? Because I think sometimes our natural reactions are to be defensive about stuff or people
Mm,
or things like that. And the whole point about therapy and having a therapist is supposed to be a sort of non judgment zone. So where sometimes you feel you've got to be defensive or jump to somebody's defense, this is the environment where there should be no egos. You know, you don't worry about hurting anybody else's feeling because it's all confidential, so you can talk super openly. Um, and I just think it's important to like let that be and not lie, because I think that's quite common actually. You know, for some people is naturally you wouldn't be as honest in all of these situations if you were telling everybody else. Maybe you might tweak things slightly to make someone look maybe a tiny bit better in your story if they're, say it's your partner or whoever it is, and you know you wouldn't want to say to your friends, oh yeah, god, they said this or they did that, because you don't want to impair
yeah, yeah.
their view of them, or you know your dad or your mom or whoever it may be. You don't
Yeah,
need
you've
to
got
do that with
to
your therapist. You can just say it how you feel and say it in its complete raw state. And I think that is so empowering to take those filters off and be able to talk in its barest form, how it comes out without having to go, how do I, sometimes when you're having a conversation, you've got a thought in your head and you go, how do I say this nicely? Like, how do I say this in a way that doesn't make me sound like I hate them, or like, because sometimes it can come across like that, right? You know, when you say, so how do I say this in a way that's
yeah,
not
yeah,
going
I
to be
get what you mean.
controversial or not going to, you don't need to do that. Your best thing is to not do that and let them see that version of you that really needs the help and support. So I think writing things down and just having a little bit of time, but also bear in mind, like, they've probably worked with hundreds and hundreds of people. I'm sure they've heard it all before.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, they're not going to be sat there judging you and be like, well, you know, what the hell is this turned up?
Might do.
Oh, yeah, they might do. But I doubt they won't because they, and I think even when um, they're trained in such a way that even if they hear something that's shocking, they might they might give you some sort of confidence like, wow, that's really hard. I imagine like
Yeah.
XYZ, or I imagine that was really difficult. And they give you a bit of
Validation
reassurance
as
and
well.
validation, which is, that's been the best part for me in terms of therapy, is just feeling a bit more validated about my feelings. Um, but also, they never go, oh, like they never like bloody,
There's a
like
first
sat there
time for
like,
everything. No, yeah, totally.
they're
I think
trained to deal with it in such a way that it's like you, even if they came away from it and they were like, "Oh my god,"
yeah, they're
you
not
would
gonna
never
tell
see that.
you.
No,
Yeah.
you would never see that, and I think that I think it's really important that if you're nervous as well, that you tell them that you're feeling nervous, because then the likelihood is they'll put you at ease. Whereas if you go in and you're slightly more quiet because you're anxious or nervous and they don't know, then it's harder for them to unpack how you might be feeling in that situation, or what your feelings are, if you haven't been honest about how you're feeling about going to therapy. I think
Yeah, no,
there
I
is
I think they'll
some
probably
anxiety
ask,
there.
I imagine, sort of how you
No, I
feeling
don't
to
think mine
do.
did.
Oh, really?
No, I think she just kind of started um with, why did you reach out to me? Why are you here? Like, how can I help?
Yeah, yeah.
Um
Okay.
and that was like her first question, was just to let me, I suppose, voice my reason for feeling like I'm there, because I can imagine for everybody there might be a slightly different circumstance as to what brought them to therapy.
And some people are sort of forced into it, aren't they, in
Yeah,
fairness?
definitely, especially in relationships and stuff like that. Some people have been told, like, you have, like, for us to stay together, you've got to go to therapy, or we need to do this a bit more, or maybe your partner, or you're doing, or maybe, some people start therapy because they are, suicidal or feelings those sort of ways, and they've maybe not ready to talk about it, but their family's going, you've got to go and speak to
Gotta try
somebody, you've
something.
got to try something, because we can't keep going down this route. I think it's a good thing that you've made that decision by yourself.
Yeah. I'm finally there. I think it's been a long time coming, and I'm just gonna make sure I've got plenty of reflective time afterwards, which I think is important for anyone else who's
Yes.
looking to venture into this. Is just some time to decompress and to try and think about, what it is that you've just talked through and how it's made you feel and what like the sort of next steps are and that sort of thing as well.
I suppose it depends how comfortable you are as well in terms of sharing. But I always found it super helpful after every therapy session. Jamie and I always sit down and go through what I've
Yeah,
spoke
what you
about.
spoke about. Yeah.
And naturally, I might not share every single thing that I've discussed. I mean, I do, because me and him have that kind of relationship anyway, where I feel like even if I've spoke about him, I can talk to him about that, and that's why I've seen like such a positive change even in our relationship over the years since I've been in therapy, because I have been able to talk about certain things that I've discussed in therapy and what the therapists have said and how that's kind of gone. But I always find it useful just to kind of talk through it. I also usually do that for like 10 minutes and then go to the gym,
Yeah. Trying
and
to do
let
something to
yeah, just kind of
some
let it
escapism.
sink in a little bit, because I think sometimes it's when I speak to Jamie about it, it gives me time to process it and say aloud, almost repeat the things back to me that outwardly that my therapist has just said to me, because that sits with me a bit better in terms of repeating them. So not just absorbing it, but repeating like what they've said. Yeah, it just helps it stick with me a little bit better, which is why I do that. Not just because I want to talk to Jamie about it, but I find it useful in terms of me then memorizing like everything that you said. Because I don't take notes. I know some people do, but I find it easier to just be in the moment and talk and not note things that my therapist says down. And
Mm, I
I
get that.
generally am a note taker. Um, but in therapy sessions, unless there's something specific, I might say to her, "Give me a minute, I'm gonna write that down," like if she's recommended a book or something like that. But I just tend to want to be more
Present.
present rather than
Yeah.
trying to take notes. And she notes things down anyway, so she always knows what we spoke about on the last session. But yeah, I just find it better to talk it through. And then when I go to the gym, that's almost like um me allowing my body to process it without having to think about it. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like a
You get to
settling in
switch off a
time.
little bit, don't you, as well, from something that can be
Yeah.
quite draining as well. Like, I know
Yeah,
that
I
certain
definitely feel
therapy
drained sometimes
can
after.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that's
one
okay as well. Like,
it's normal, isn't it? It can put people off, though. I do know, like, one of my close friends, like, and it went through some really yeah, really awful stuff, and initially just really didn't wanna go through therapy because it just was so difficult and so draining, and it just took so much energy, and eventually, they went back to it, and it was really helpful, but I understand from that perspective as well, it can probably just feel a little bit 'cause you like you say, Shan, in terms of, like, anything you've suppressed, you're trying to sort of go back and think hard about situations or scenarios that actually you might have buried pretty deep that you need to
yeah.
try and unlock, I suppose, and
But
talk about,
what I
so
would say about that is if it comes to your head when a therapist asks you questions about it, you've not really buried it.
yeah, that's true,
You
yeah.
haven't, and because it wouldn't come to you in that way if you've really suppressed it to a point where it doesn't impact you anymore and it doesn't have an impact on how you live your day-to-day life. A therapist asking you one or two questions in your first or second session is not
Mm,
going to bring it to light. That will be later down the line when you do a bit more self-reflection and a bit more work on understanding yourself and allow, because there's things that I've discovered about myself 3 or 4 years into therapy that I definitely suppressed,
mm,
to the point of like literally wouldn't have been able to recall it. And it's only been through uncovering different traits, different thoughts and feelings, and, you know, really, really unpacking some really deep stuff that I've been able to get to that point. But you're talking 2 years down the line. So I think, one, I think if you've suppressed it so much, you won't be worried about going to therapy about it because it won't even be in your
yeah,
thought
it won't be in
process.
you, yeah,
It won't
definitely.
even be in your front, like your forefront of your mind as something you're worried about talking about. And if you are worried about talking about something, it's because you've not suppressed it. It's still impacting you. So in that case, I would say it's really important for you to talk about it because you're using the language of it being suppressed, and you put it to the back of your head. But if it's at the forefront of you worried it's going to come up in therapy, you're going to have to talk about
Yeah, yeah,
it.
true.
Like, it's
Yeah.
definitely still having an impact on you because it wouldn't be the first thing that you were worried about. I can assure you, it just wouldn't. So I think that that's also, it's having that ability to just be really honest with yourself as well. And it's okay to be scared to talk about things. Like, there's certain bits that I've definitely had topics that I've never even spoke to my therapist about, that it's just not somewhere we ventured down yet. But, I plan to be in therapy for a very long time. So I'm sure I'll get there eventually. But it's not something that I feel is relevant for me to talk about right now. It's not come up in any of our sessions as something. So like, you can have bad things that happen to you in your life that don't necessarily impact you so heavily. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
not everything bad that happens to you, scars you so deeply that you need to speak to a therapist about it. You might want to unpack it and see if you have to, but like, I don't feel like every single thing needs to be spoke about. It's just like, what's on your mind? What do you think and feel at the moment? I think feeling is more important going into therapy. How are you feeling about stuff rather than how you're thinking about it? I'm bad for that. I always say, I think,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
rather
I
than
get
I feel this, I feel that, I feel this way, I feel that way. So yeah, listen, I'm only able to talk. This is hindsight, right? I wish somebody had said this to me when I was kind of going to my first therapy session. But like I said, I think it's slightly different circumstances. Mine came through probably a place of desperation, whereas I think yours has come through a I'm ready to talk and delve in a little bit better, and I want to feel a bit better. I'm not feeling great right now. How do I, how do I feel better? And honestly, Law, round of applause for you for being so open on such like an open platform as well, and like talking about the fact that that is how you are feeling at the moment. And it's so important for people to hear that, I think, and hear that you've got not all of us are happy all the time and we've got stuff
yeah.
going on. And
I just don't want other people to feel like they're on their own with it because, from the outside, I think, quite often it looks like people are all together and, they've got everything sorted and they're doing okay, but it's not always the case. And yeah, I just want to give other people that are sort of feeling that way right now some reassurance that it is okay. And ultimately, if you are in that place, that there's help out there and there's opportunity for you to fix it if you want to
yeah,
fix it with therapy or whatever that looks like. There are different means that will get you to where you need to be. So
yeah, and I think that it's just like, if I could think about now I'm further down the line, I would probably, if I knew when I was going into therapy what I know now, I probably would have felt a bit excited about it.
oh, that's
No,
nice.
I would do, because I think discovering yourself and like being so much more self assured in my brain, how I know myself. I know myself on such a deep level now. I know my intentions. I know why I do stuff. I know, what I'm built up on. I know how to improve myself. I know that I'm still on a journey. I know I'm not perfect and that's okay. I don't have to be.
Mm.
And like that, I think if I'd known like back then before I started that I was going to have all these like self discoveries, I would have gone into it feeling excited.
Oh, well, that's lovely to think about, isn't it? I suppose. I hope I'm also in that place eventually, and for
Yeah,
anyone
but
else who's looking to venture into it, they are too.
100%. And maybe that's a thought. Like, obviously, you don't want to get your hopes up too much in case he's crap, but I
That'd be
hope
awful,
he's
yeah.
not.
God, imagine now it'd be like, oh,
No, but listen, some people just don't like it. And it's not to say, if you didn't relate to him, it's not to say he'd be a crap therapist. That's just
no, yeah,
you've
it's just
not
yeah,
found that connection,
that
like. And I
connection.
think it's important that if you don't find that connection, then you think about what your other options are in and what they look like. Um, and I don't know what it would look like in terms of via the NHS if you didn't feel like it was working, whether you could go back to your GP and say, that doesn't really work for
Yeah,
me, but
true.
I'm not ready to go on medication yet. Is there anything else I can be referred for, or can I
Yeah,
investigate a different? I'm not sure, but it's worth asking, right? Don't ask, you don't get. So.
definitely.
But yeah, so I think if let's do three takeaways. Write things down.
Yeah.
What else would you say you're going to do before you go?
I'm gonna just make sure I definitely have some time afterwards for like a bit of reflection and
Yeah,
maybe try and do something like to decompress, whether that's go for a coffee or go to the
yeah.
gym or just
So
do
do it on a
something.
day where you've got time.
Yeah.
So, like, make sure you book it in for a day where you can maybe do 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Maybe you want 15 minutes before it to just kind of
Yeah.
settle in as well. So that's good. And
Yeah.
then I think just have a think about why you're there, like, and what that feels like in terms
Yeah,
of,
what I want the output to be, I guess, of the
yeah, how do you
sessions.
want to feel like when you've not after your first session, obviously, but like what are you looking for? Are you looking for just to understand your emotions a bit better? Are you looking to feel better? What is it that and you might not have all the answers to these, but I think it's good for you to try and
Starting
think
point.
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
definitely.
just have a bit of an idea as to not necessarily all the events that are happening, but just how you're feeling in general. So I think, like you said for yourself, it's that feeling of loneliness, it's that
Mhm.
feeling of sadness, and it's that feeling of like a bit of anxiety around stuff, and at times not knowing how you're feeling about things. And there probably some four key areas to note down that you want to cover, and then
Some big areas here.
they are, but you'll probably find a lot of them intertwined.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
But no, hopefully that's helpful to people. But I think it's nice that obviously, Laura, you don't need to give us a step by step every therapy session that you have. Like, can you imagine Laura's like decompression? I'm gonna come onto the
Oh
podcast and tell
god, yeah.
everyone.
Nobody wants to hear that, wouldn't it?
But no, I think it's really important that, like, one, you've got like the opportunity to talk about it ahead of going, but then obviously as you go on, you've got a bit of a journey where you can talk to people about, actually, if maybe you don't have the best experience, actually it might be good for people to hear that and hear about the
Yeah,
two
yeah.
sides of the coin, and what your
100%.
journey kind of looks like, and how maybe hopefully it makes you feel better. um
Fingers crossed.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, I'm just, if you've got any parting words, though, but I just think it's like, again, just thank you for sharing and talking about it, because I think it's super important.
No, of course, I'm happy to. Like I say, I just want to give other people, I guess, confidence as well that it's absolutely okay for you to feel this way, even if it's sort of a couple of years down the line after you've been through some difficult stuff. You can always, look back and reflect on things and make positive changes. And it's, yeah, there's no sort of end point or starting point, I guess, in terms of when you can start to work on this stuff. So
No,
it's just putting yourself forward and being open to giving things a try, I guess. So I hope other people feel like they can do the same as well if you're on the fence about it. But yeah.
no, and listen, it's taken you a while to get to this point, right?
Well,
Which I
yeah, nearly
think
3 years. So, well, probably should have gone before, but probably a long time ago. But you put it off, and again, I think I've said this before, but just being like an older sister, um, it wasn't intentional. Of course, it wasn't, but there was never really anybody there for me
yeah,
when I was growing up and stuff. And there's a theory, and like a notion called like the glass child. Don't know if
yeah,
you've heard of it. Yeah, where it's like, oh, Laura's fine, Laura's always fine. That's how it was when I was growing up. It was always me.
mm,
I'd be the one that'd be, you know, I'd just be self sufficient. I get on with stuff. I'm independent. Nothing bothered me. But of course it does, you
yeah,
know. But at the time, I think when you're treated that way, you kind of feel as though you can't have any issues, or you can't be upset, or you can't not handle things really well, or because it's kind of like an expectation. So I do think that's probably like part of it, and it's like crept into my adult life where still now I can't ask for help. I really
yeah.
struggle to say that I'm having issues with stuff, or like I need maybe some
Support.
support. So yeah, I just want to try and understand why I do that and how I can stop doing it, basically.
No, no, I think that's a great place to start as well, in terms of like how you're feeling, and when you do speak to a therapist, like a little bit about that, because you are so self-aware, so there will be things that you've picked up in yourself, but you don't know how to get past them. It's like, I'm aware of
No,
this. I
yeah, no,
think
it's there.
I
Yeah.
know I think I know where it's come from, but I don't really know how to resolve it. That's a lot of what I end up doing.
Yeah,
It's like
it's natural, isn't it, to
I
just
identify these problems, I identify these patterns. I'm a very like pattern driven person. Like, I identify trends even in myself and patterns in myself, but I don't know how to get past
yeah,
them or
it's there,
resolve
but it's
them.
like, what's yeah, how yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's sort of sometimes it's a difficult one, isn't it? Sometimes you don't acknowledge these things or recognize that they're even there, but when you do, you still don't necessarily know how to fix them. It's like, oh
It's like,
god,
I've acknowledged it, but I don't know how to fix
I'm
it.
just gonna ignore it. Yeah, I know it's
Yeah.
there, but it's like it's
Well, I
fine.
do that. I'm terrible for that. Like I've said before, I've spoken to my therapist about the fact that I identify when I'm burning myself out, but I don't stop until I physically hit a
Yeah,
brick wall.
yeah,
Like, and I really want to stop doing that. And I can identify when I'm going towards it, and towards it. I just can't quite stop myself from
Until
getting.
you're at the point of, like, yeah, no return almost,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's definitely an ego thing. Like I can do it. I can get through anything. I can do any, like I'm unpacking it now, but and I'm trying to not let myself get there. But it's again, I've been in therapy for what, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years, like 4 years, something like that. And I'm only just getting to the point where I'm
You're a veteran.
addressing some of those things. But yeah, I think it's important to like, as somebody who is like self-aware, is to not like put down your own thoughts and feelings as well, and feel free to bring them up with a therapist, and don't feel like you're telling them you're doing therapy for them. If you're self-aware enough to know that there's certain things that you think you have been carrying but you don't know
Mm.
how to resolve them, then that's a great place to start. And one thing I did want to mention just before we go, and I think this is probably a topic maybe even for another day, but I think it's important to bring up in your circumstance is, and I think me knowing you so well, and our listeners will probably agree, like over the last 23 episodes, I don't think you personally will have a problem with this, but I have heard people having issues with it in the past. I think when people have passed away, it is sometimes easier to sort of view them with rose tinted glasses. And what
Mm.
you may find when you go over stuff um, from years that have gone by and on the lead up, like you're mentioning, like your childhood and being the older sister, and Laura's fine. You might find that you bring up um, not negative conversations about the person that you've lost, but definitely things that maybe you've been brought up in a certain manner and it was never done with bad intent, but they have done things along the way that have led you to struggle with things in the future. And for somebody that's lost someone, that can be quite confronting, and sometimes you can feel bad about talking what feels like you're talking badly about the loved one that you've lost.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
want to just almost like acknowledge that and relieve you of that pressure that says like it doesn't make you love them any less or miss them any
No,
less.
relationships are complicated, aren't they? No relationship's perfect 100%,
No,
so
but it's almost like go into it sort of acknowledging that you might have to do a little bit of that, because
oh, yeah.
and it will feel uncomfortable, Law. There's no doubt that it will feel uncomfortable, and that's not to say that your mum wasn't a great mum. She bloody was, but like no one's
No one's
perfect. Do you know what I
perfect,
mean?
yeah.
Like, and I'm sure there will be bits around like your childhood with your mum and dad and your siblings and all those sort of things. But it's important to still view them for what it was in that moment rather than how they are now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I get that totally. It's a
because
really good point.
Yeah, because I think otherwise it can be quite difficult to get to the root cause of things if you're sat there with like, I don't want to talk badly about that individual because I've lost them now. Like I don't want to have those conversations. And sometimes I can get a bit like that with my dad.
Yeah.
Like my dad definitely wasn't perfect. He definitely caused a lot of the reasons why I ended up being in therapy. Um and I think losing him definitely gives me a different insight as to how I think about stuff, but also I can still acknowledge that when he was here, he didn't always treat me very well. And he didn't always do things that I wanted from a dad. And I didn't have the best childhood because of some of the choices that he made or my parents made or whatever it is. That doesn't
Mm.
mean that I have to think badly of my dad now he's gone, or think about my mum in certain ways of how she handled situations when I was growing up when my dad was struggling. But I can take it for what it was at that time
Yeah,
and
yeah.
acknowledge the fact of
And you
how it made
understand
me
yourself
feel.
better now because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just important to address that, because I can imagine some people, and I've heard people that have said, you know, I went to therapy and I had a really bad time, but I felt uncomfortable because I worked out a lot of it. Of the reasons I was feeling the way I was down to my dad. And I don't want to think about my dad in a bad light because I've lost him now and I love him. And it's like, no, it doesn't take away from the fact that you love and miss him and how much you loved him. But you can acknowledge the fact that, someone's actions have caused you to be a kind of
How
way
you are,
in the
yeah.
future, who you are and how you feel and how you, and it, most of the time, what impact people have on you in most cases, is never with bad intent. It just happened to be the way the cards have fallen that it's had the impact it had. It's like the butterfly effect, right? If that happened, if your parents had brought you up in a certain way and then something else hadn't happened 10 years later completely unrelated to your parents, you might not be feeling the way that you are. But had they have
Mm,
parented you differently and then that one thing 10 years later they had no control over what happened, you might have felt completely differently. Like it's no one's fault, but it's important to address it. So,
yeah, for sure.
but I'm sure, honestly, I'm excited for you. I know you're not feeling, not that you're not feeling excited. I obviously feel that you're slightly apprehensive. So I'm
Yeah, we'll
excited for
see.
you to go on the journey because I'm hoping that you have a positive impact, like sorry, a positive experience almost straight away. And if you don't, we've got
Give
plenty
it
of
a try.
recommendations of good therapists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you all for listening. Hopefully, you found that an interesting one. And how nice is it to have Laura back, by the way? I know you guys
You.
heard her on the Mother's Day episode, but we recorded that a week or so before Laura went away. So I haven't, my last two recordings have been with two different people, and they were great. Like, I love Paula. Like, it was great to meet Wes, but I miss Laura.
Oh, miss you too.
I miss having my
And Alyssa's
partner in crime.
I'm back. She's back in the
She's back.
cellar.
Yeah, in the cellar she is, and
Yeah,
I'm in
excuse
my
my washing
dining
up there. That's the holiday washing in case anyone's realised. I just realised my drying rack's in the background.
I
Sorry,
didn't
guys.
notice. I didn't notice it. So you.
Everyone's gonna be like, "What's Laura got on her head there?" It's, yes, it is my maiden. So
Oh, bless you. But yeah, give us a follow, give us a like. Make sure that you're telling us what you want to hear from us. If you want different types of guests on, let us know what type of guests you want to hear from. We've definitely got a couple lined up. We've got some people from America that want to talk to us as well, which could be interesting. So we're going to definitely go down that
nice.
route. And we have a therapist that we have spoken to about coming on, and we're going to try arrange that for the next couple of weeks. And I think it would be really good to hear from an actual therapist as well and their kind
Yeah,
of
different
view.
perspective.
And again, they might have different advice as to what to prepare for your first, um, your first ever session. So we can definitely ask them that question. But if any of the listeners have some questions for a therapist, then send them our way and we can queue them up and get them ready to go.
Yeah,
But see
definitely.
you all next week. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, we'll be together.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Hopefully, I'm feeling better. But yeah, love you all lots. Thanks for listening and give us a follow, give us a like. No Time to Cry podcast, and see you all very soon.
See you soon.
Bye.